During my first pregnancy, my wife had no morning sickness, but I threw up so violently that I lost 30 pounds. My wife was deeply moved. During the second pregnancy, seeing me tormented by morning sickness again, she fought with her parents for 3 days out of concern. On the fourth day, she came home and handed me a baby name book, grinning. The last name can be from either side, she said, but the first name must be chosen by you, my husband. As a man who had married into the family, I was more than satisfied just to have the right to name my child. But a month later, when I showed Victoria Belmont the name I had carefully chosen after poring over the book, she didn't seem pleased. Instead, she looked as if she had made up her mind about something. A psychic told her, "This child is destined for a hard life. A humble name will help her survive." In my opinion, calling her Expecta would be just fine. I froze, unable to believe what I was hearing. We had a huge fight, but Victoria just smiled, her tone light. "Didn't you go by Burden to Father for 20 years? It's just a name. She can change it when she's an adult, just like you did." Overcome with anger, I fainted. Victoria panicked. She ran 7 red lights on the way to the hospital, summoning every specialist to wake me up. I couldn't understand her erratic behavior lately until her phone rang. A clear male voice came from the other end. "Miss Belmont, you didn't actually take my joke seriously, did you? Even if you name your child Expecta, I'm not renewing the support agreement." My world spun. I knew this marriage was over. The air suddenly went quiet. I held my trembling right hand steady to keep from dropping the phone and asked softly, "Who is this?" The torrent of words on the other end stopped abruptly. A few seconds later, he chuckled, as if slightly annoyed. "Oh, you really don't know who I am." He was excited, his tone almost boastful. "To keep me from leaving, your wife coaxed me into signing a 3-year support agreement. A man's youth is precious, too. I've had my fun, but now she won't let me go." In a cold voice, I told him to shut up, but he acted as if he hadn't heard. "So what if you, the live-in son-in-law, got the rare privilege of naming the child? I deliberately suggested a disgusting name for your kid, and after agonizing over it for a month, she still obediently went along with it." I clenched my jaw, my fist tightening unconsciously. So, the psychic was just an excuse. It wasn't enough for Victoria to reopen my old wounds. She even let my child become fodder for their flirtation. Noticing my silence, Ethan Shaw let out a soft H and then laughed maliciously. "Hey, why aren't you talking? Could it be?" He dragged out the words. I hit a nerve. My breath hitched. I looked down stiffly at the phone in my hand, which I had hung up without thinking. My vision blurred instantly in front of my wife's lover. The composure and dignity I had fought so hard to maintain shattered in that instant. Just then, there was a light knock on the door. 5 seconds later, Victoria pushed it open. Seeing my tear-streaked face, she rushed to the bedside. "Sincere, are you feeling unwell somewhere else? We'll call the doctor right away." I frantically deleted the call history. Victoria placed her palm on my forehead and relaxed when she found my temperature was normal. Seeing me holding her phone, she even teased, "You've checked my phone inside and out 1,000 times. Still worried?" We had been dating for 6 months and married for 3 years. All of Victoria's passwords were my birthday, so we had an unspoken understanding about this little game of checking each other's phones. But this time, I lowered my head in silence to hide my bitterness. I had checked it 1,000 times, and the phone was always spotless. This man, Ethan Shaw, was hidden very well by Victoria, so well that I never realized that on our wedding day, as she was vowing her eternal love to me, she was also figuring out how to get another man to sign a support agreement. So well that, for these past 3 years, I remained lost in the sweetness of our love. So much so that when I learned the truth this way, my first reaction was, "This can't be real, can it?" Seeing I was still unhappy, Victoria pouted and leaned in to kiss me. I pushed her away instinctively and couldn't help but lean over the side of the bed to dry heave. Victoria patted my back sympathetically, then took my hand and placed it on the slight curve of her belly, saying in a mock stern voice, "Expecta. Remember to thank Daddy with Mommy." "Okay. Thank you, Daddy, for taking the morning sickness for Mommy." I looked at Victoria in disbelief. We had fought so much over this name that I ended up in the hospital, and she still wouldn't give it up. Did she love Ethan that much? The baby in her womb seemed to stir, as if warmed by the heat of our palms. Feeling the baby's response, I slowly unclenched my fists. I fought back the tears welling in my eyes and asked softly, was the name I chose not good enough? My mother named me Burden to Father because she thought I was a burden. You know how much I was ridiculed for it growing up. I don't want my child to. Enough, Victoria snapped. Will you ever stop? You've brought up that name 1,000 times. If you're not sick of it, I am. Seeing her impatience, I felt a daze come over me. Because I couldn't breastfeed as a baby, it cost a lot of extra money. So, my mother saw me as a debt collector, a burden to my father. I never told anyone about this because of my insecurity. The only exception was Victoria. Perhaps it was because of her time studying abroad, but her love was bold and passionate, so passionate that I didn't even have the courage to accept it when she confessed her feelings for me yet again. I threw caution to the wind and laid my vulnerabilities and wounds bare to her, but she didn't leave. Instead, she gave me a gentle, careful hug. The day we made it official, Victoria went with me to change my name. The sun was shining brightly that day, and she smiled as she handed me a bouquet of hyacinths. Sincere Clark, congratulations on your new life. I should have known long ago. A lifetime is a long time. When love fades, the scars that were once so carefully protected are destined to be torn open again and again. Seeing my stunned expression, Victoria paused and softened her tone slightly. Sincere, you two are different. The psychic said, this child will have a difficult life. Calling her expecta is to keep fate from taking notice. It's better to be safe than sorry in these matters. Are you really going to gamble with your child's entire life? Victoria cajoled me with endless patience, emotionally blackmailing me with words that were practically a curse on our child, all for that support agreement with Ethan Shaw. I felt my warm heart slowly turn as cold as my hands. Just then, Victoria's phone rang again. Seeing the caller ID, her expression softened instantly, and she started to walk out. A knot formed in my stomach. I grabbed her arm, my voice trembling. Victoria Belmont, if you insist on naming my child expecta, then you might as well not have her. Or you give birth, we divorce, and I'll raise her. I meant it. It was also the last chance I was giving her. You could hear a pin drop in the hospital room. The only sound was the insistent ringing of the phone. I held my breath, waiting for her reaction. Victoria stared blankly for 2 seconds, then couldn't help but chuckle. Sincere, don't be dramatic. My parents are waiting to hold their second grandchild, and Nana is waiting to be a big sister. She smoothed the frown lines on my forehead with a look of concern, her tone very serious. You don't have to worry about a thing. Just trust me. My hand slowly loosened its grip. I numbly watched Victoria's retreating back as she hurried away. Perhaps because she was so loved, Victoria hadn't suffered at all during either pregnancy. That's why she practically flew out the door without a care, not a single thought for my discomfort. If she had just turned around, she would have seen the fine beads of sweat covering my pale face. But she didn't. I was discharged after 3 days of 4 glucose strips. As the doctor insisted, I needed the nutrients from my constant vomiting. After leaving the hospital, I took a cab straight home. The fingerprint lock beeped success. I had just opened the door when I saw a man tossing my jade pendant up and down in his hands. My mind went blank. Before I could tell him to put it down, he caught the pendant with a frown and slammed it onto the floor. The jade shattered into pieces. He kicked the fragments aside, picked up a lilac-colored shard, and said cheerfully, "This kind of old-fashioned junk is embarrassing to wear out. We can have it ground into cufflinks. At least, it'll be useful for something." Victoria was sitting on the sofa and chimed in indulgently, "Lilac cufflinks would go perfectly with your suit today." I stared at the pieces scattered all over the floor, frozen. This jade pendant was our family's heirloom. My grandfather, on the verge of starvation, had refused to sell it for food, eventually passing it down to me. But I had married into another family for love, leaving the Clark line with no heir. And now even this pendant was shattered. I felt the blood rush to my head. I strode towards him and swung my fist. Victoria saw me and her face went blank for 2 seconds before she shot up. My punch stopped abruptly, hitting the arm Victoria had raised to block it. Behind her, Ethan Shaw cried out, lifting her slightly reddened arm and blowing on it tenderly. "Miss Belmont, does it hurt?" Before Victoria could speak, Ethan prepared to kneel before me to apologize. "I'm sorry, Mr. Clark. I didn't know this cheap trinket was so important to you. If I had known, I would have picked something a little more expensive to break. Hit me, curse me, Do whatever you want. Miss Belmont is pregnant. Why did you have to be so rough? I turned and looked towards the bedroom. The boxes that once held gifts from Victoria to me had been ripped open, their contents scattered everywhere. I unconsciously took 2 steps back, trembling with rage. But Ethan, kneeling behind me, suddenly shrieked. Then Victoria shoved me aside forcefully. Ethan was kneeling on the floor, clutching his hand. Enough, Victoria roared. She irritably grabbed a blank check and scribbled her name on it. She threw it at my feet. It's just a jade pendant worth a few thousand. Here's a blank check. Fill it in for whatever you want. I'll pay you back 100 times over. She knew exactly what this pendant meant to me and my family, but she offered no explanation, simply letting Ethan wrap his arm around her. As they turned to leave, I sat on the floor in a daze, silent for a long time. Then I picked up the check from the floor and put it in my bag. Any amount is fine. Victoria Belmont, you'd better remember those words. Victoria didn't come home again that night. I went to see a lawyer about a divorce, but Arthur and Eleanor Belmont found out. When I returned home with the drafted divorce papers, they were already sitting in the living room waiting for me. Eleanor Belmont looked at the papers in my hand. Sincere Clark, get on your knees, Mom, I started to say. But before I could even mention the divorce, Eleanor cut me off. Don't call me Mom. You're just a man who married into our family. What right do you have to make my daughter get an abortion? Eleanor stood up excitedly and slapped me twice across the face, her trembling finger pointing at me. You married into this family. Wasn't it enough of an honor for us to let you name the child? What more do you want? Arthur Belmont shouted. The baby is already 5 months along, and you want my daughter to terminate the pregnancy, and you're asking her for a divorce? Arthur's cane slammed against my calves. I don't care why you two are fighting. You will go kneel in the family chapel right now and reflect on your actions. My body, weak from a long period of poor rest, stumbled back to steps. A stinging pain belatedly registered on my face and calves. They hadn't even asked for the cause, simply deciding it was all my fault. Too bad. This time, their daughter had let them down. I threw the divorce papers down with a sarcastic laugh. It's your daughter who's cheating and keeping a lover. Why should I be the one to kneel in the chapel? Shock flickered across their faces, quickly replaced by expressions of insult. For generations, the Belmont family had been known for harmonious marriages. Infidelity was a disgrace to be recorded in the family records and condemned. In the entire history of the Belmonts, there had been very few such cases, and I was the unlucky exception. Eleanor clutched her chest, fuming. Sincere Clark, is there someone else? I knew it. I knew you weren't sincere when you said you'd marry into the family. Now you're slandering my daughter for some little out there. I gave a bitter laugh, feeling helpless. Victoria was their only daughter, but I had only agreed to marry into the family because I wanted a warm and happy home. Just then, my phone rang. It was Ethan Shaw. This was the first time he had ever called me from his own phone. Remembering that Victoria's parents wanted proof, I started a recording and answered, "Are you deaf? I told you to stop crying. Didn't you hear me? Cry again and I'll slap you." Amid the noisy background, my daughter's cries were piercingly clear. My breath hitched, and I felt my heart was about to break when Ethan realized the call had connected. His tone was impatient. "Sincere Clark, get over here and pick up your daughter within 10 minutes. Your wife has a date with me at the movies." "I'm only waiting 10 minutes. I whipped my head around to look at Eleanor, incredulous. "Mom, how could you leave my daughter with a stranger?" She thought I was changing the subject because I had no proof and said angrily, "What stranger? Ethan is my daughter's assistant. He's not going to hurt Na, is he?" I immediately grabbed my phone and headed for the door. Hearing her words, I turned back and sneered. "He's your daughter's other man." When I arrived, only my daughter was standing there, alone and afraid. I looked at the bright red handprint on her tender cheek. I couldn't believe Ethan had actually laid a hand on a child. "Daddy," the moment my daughter saw me, the tears welling in her eyes streamed down her face. I swept her into my arms, crying along with her. In that moment, I truly hated myself. It was my weakness that gave him the audacity to hurt my daughter. I dried my tears and comforted her. "Nina, don't be afraid. Daddy will make the bad man pay. He loves Victoria, doesn't he? Well then, I'll give him a little push." The next day, I arranged to meet Ethan and got straight to the point. "I can give you a sum of money on The condition that you leave the country immediately and never contact my wife again." Ethan, who had been stroking his lilac cufflinks, paused and then retorted, "Why should I leave the country?" He crossed his legs arrogantly, pointing to the car outside the cafe. "She just bought me a new Mercedes yesterday and gave me $5 million in cash. Victoria's been spoiling me rotten, and I don't even have to sleep with her. I'd like to enjoy these good days a little longer." I cut him off, the smile on my face unwavering. "So what? As long as Victoria and I are not divorced, I can sue you to get all that money back at any time." Ethan uncrossed his legs, his smile slowly vanishing. "She's willing to spend money to make me happy. What business is it of yours? Don't forget, I'm not Victoria's lover anymore. You have no right to stop her from spending money on a friend." I put down my coffee and sneered. "Just a way to seduce women. I know all about it. Mr. Shaw, you've fallen for my wife, haven't you? All your antics lately have been to force me to file for divorce. But I'm not going to." Ethan's hand tightened around his coffee cup. I adopted the tone of a love-struck fool from a TV show. "She hasn't divorced me in 3 years, which means she still loves me. We have a lovely daughter, and she's carrying my child in her belly." I stood up, straightened my clothes, and gave him a contemptuous look. "I came here today to tell you one thing. You're out. Just a bed warmer. How can that compare to true love?" The sound of shattering glass came from behind me. I smirked. A love-struck male mistress is a rare sight indeed. Lucky for me, I found one. Unfortunately, while I could easily see through Ethan's feelings, I couldn't see through Victoria's. Before I could come up with an excuse to keep Victoria busy for a couple of days, she flew to Oregon just because I casually mentioned I was craving wild mushrooms. 2 days later, she proudly presented me with mushrooms. She had picked herself. "Sincere, have a taste." Victoria was still wearing an apron, smiling as if there were no rift between us. Looking at her smile, I once again had the illusion that she still loved me. But an illusion is just that, an illusion. On the third morning, a single phone call from Ethan had Victoria rushing out without even grabbing a coat. I watched as they embraced, kissed. After dinner, they went straight to a hotel. I patiently called Victoria 14 times. When she finally answered, I could hear faint breathing on the other end, and I immediately started recording. "Victoria, what are you doing? Why aren't you answering my calls? Thinking of you. Is that what you wanted to hear? Sorry, but your wife is with me right now." Ethan's voice sounded triumphant, like he had just won a major battle. "I hear pregnant women are even more delicious. I'll be sure to show your wife and child a really good time." The sound of splashing water trickled through the phone, every drop hitting my heart like a hammer. Half an hour later, I brought Victoria's parents to the hotel door. From inside, we could hear the faint sounds, a mix of pain and pleasure. I suppressed the rage burning in me and looked at the two elders, mocking them. "Is this enough proof for you? Congratulations! Your daughter is going to be a disgrace in your family records for all time." Whispers from the crowd around us grew louder. Arthur and Eleanor's hands shook with anger. "Once Victoria is finished, we can talk about the divorce." I pressed the room key into Eleanor's hand and turned to leave without another glance. This was the same hotel Victoria had once brought me to when we were newly married. The night streets outside were brightly lit, but my heart was full of worry and confusion. I had gotten my revenge, yet there was no satisfaction. Suddenly, a sharp pain shot through my chest, and an intense wave of grief washed over me. I leaned weakly against a wall on the street, thinking of the baby in Victoria's womb. I rushed back toward the hotel only to see an ambulance already pulling away. I quickly grabbed a bystander, an auntie who had been watching the spectacle, and asked what had happened. The auntie gave a gloating smile. An old couple came to catch their daughter with her lover, but I guess the guy was too rough. He made the woman lose the baby in her belly. There was blood everywhere. Numb, I let go of her and ran upstairs on pure instinct. The lights in the room were blazing. Ethan looked toward the doorway in terror. The floor was littered with all sorts of implements. The man who had been taunting me triumphantly just half an hour ago was now a pathetic mess. His face bore a fresh slap mark. There were dark bruises on his neck, barely hidden by his collar. Several cigarette butts were scattered across the floor. His knees were covered in red spots, like fresh burns, but I barely noticed his state. My eyes were fixed on the crimson stain soaking the bed sheets. I kicked a blood-stained toy out of my way and swung my fist at Ethan. Seeing me, his expression twisted, jealousy and madness flashing in his eyes. You were so cocky before, weren't you? So what if you have two kids? I couldn't do anything about the older one, but the little one in Victoria's belly, ahaha, I could still get rid of it. When I arrived at the hospital, they told me Victoria had already been transferred to a postpartum recovery center. A doctor brought out the baby for me to see, a tiny, blood-covered body, a 5-month-old girl already fully formed, Hope Clark. The name I had spent a month poring over books to choose. In the end, it was engraved on her tombstone. The last bond between me and Victoria had been severed by her own hands. After returning home, I packed all of my and my daughter's belongings. That night, I moved with Na into a new house. The next morning, I carried the divorce papers to the recovery center where Victoria was staying. From the moment I had received Ethan's call, after all those days of dragging things out, I knew it was time to end this marriage. Inside the room, Victoria was trying to convince her parents to help her hide the truth from me. Eleanor was leaning against the bed, wiping her tears. Do you really think you can hide it? Cheaters are always supremely confident. The man I found is very obedient. He signed an agreement. He won't go spreading rumors to Sincere. He's had a vasectomy, so you don't have to worry about me getting pregnant by him. As for the baby, I'll just find a hospital and say we found a genetic issue and had to terminate. He won't look into it. Ethan stood obediently at Victoria's side, the light back in his eyes. Victoria looked at her parents hopefully, as if believing that with their approval, everything would go back to normal. After all, she thought she had hidden it perfectly. The fact that I hadn't suspected a thing for 3 years was proof enough. To her, Arthur was so enraged by her words that his heart condition nearly flared up again. He looked at his daughter's calm expression and felt utterly disappointed. I originally wanted to ask you what kind of wife you've been, but now? He raised his cane high. Your actions make you unworthy of even being called a human being. Ethan couldn't bear to see his master so humiliated. As Arthur's cane came down, he threw himself in front of Victoria to protect her. Sir, please don't hit her. Victoria's body is still weak. As he moved, his sleeve slid down, revealing black and blue marks beneath. Arthur immediately remembered what he had seen the night before and cried out in grief, You fooled around and lost your child, and you're still thinking about this man. Eleanor leaned against the bed, wiping her tears. We won't help you. You made a mistake, and you have to face the consequences. Apologize to Sincere properly and part on good terms. She looked at Ethan with disgust and rang the bell for security. Get this man out of here and don't let him in again. Victoria still didn't think she was in the wrong. A flash of sorrow crossed her face, but she said stubbornly, It was just an accident. It has nothing to do with Ethan. I clenched my fists. A life dismissed by Victoria with a single careless word, accident. This was her child too. As for the baby, she paused. We can always have another. I'll give Sincere another child, one who will take his last name. That will be my compensation to him. I couldn't listen anymore. I threw the door open with force. How could Victoria have the nerve to talk about having another child? I had no patience left to wait for their argument to end. This farce had to stop. I looked at her mockingly. Victoria, you and your lover messed around and killed our child. How do you have the gall to talk about having another child with me? When Victoria saw me, her expression was blank for a full minute. She unconsciously grabbed my hand, her voice trembling. You knew all along, didn't you? I admitted it readily, recounting all the ways Victoria had indulged and spoiled Ethan over the past few days. Since he loves you so much and you can't live without him, then I'll grant you your wish. I pulled out the divorce papers and said calmly, Let's get a divorce. Just then, Ethan broke free from the security guards and burst through the door, a look of joy flashing in his eyes. Victoria stared at the divorce papers as if struck by a massive blow. After a long moment, she slowly raised her head, looked at Ethan, and asked me, Ethan said I can't live without him. That I bought him a car and gave him $5 million in cash. Victoria slowly stood up and walked toward Ethan step by step. Ethan's face turned deathly pale. His body swayed against the door frame. He looked at Victoria pleadingly, shaking his head again and again. Victoria strode forward and slapped him hard across the face. You did it on purpose, didn't you? You killed my child. You knew I didn't want to, Victoria cried, tears streaming down her face as she slapped Ethan again and again. But you wouldn't listen. It was you who, after the contract expired, kept saying you would leave me while threatening me with those videos you secretly filmed," she continued, humiliation written all over her face. "Whenever I didn't do what you wanted, you threatened to tell my husband. I thought if I just gave in these past few days, I could quickly coax you into signing the new agreement and finally get my peaceful life back. But I had already succeeded, and you made me lose my child and destroyed my marriage." Victoria's eyes burned with disgust. "This whole sordid relationship, you were the one who was always demanding and clinging to me. The superiority Ethan had worked so hard to maintain shattered instantly." He collapsed onto the floor, crying as he refuted her words. "I love you. That's why I was willing to cling to you. But to say I was the one demanding it, I don't accept that." His expression twisted into reckless madness. "Sincere Clark, do you think your love story is so perfect? Let me tell you the truth. Victoria and I were together when we were abroad. It was your appearance that stole my place. If it weren't for you, 3 years ago, I would have gotten a marriage certificate, not a support agreement." Victoria's face changed drastically. She rushed forward to cover his mouth, then looked back at me frantically, speaking quickly. "It's not like that, Sincere. Let me explain." The divorce agreement crumpled in my hand, but I barely noticed. My mind flashed back to Victoria's shy face when she first confessed her feelings to me. Suddenly, I felt sick. The room fell silent for a long time. Finally, my voice broke through, filled with unrestrained anger. "Victoria Belmont, why aren't you talking? Your explanation, can I hear it now?" Victoria looked utterly defeated. She began to speak, admitting she had been sent abroad in her teens, alone in a foreign country, facing constant racial discrimination. The pressure had twisted her psychologically, and she had started using violence as an outlet. That was when Ethan appeared. No matter what she did to him, he unconditionally tolerated it. Ethan's tears became her comfort. Only when he was in pain or begging would she feel a fleeting moment of happiness. But how could she ever admit this to her parents? Or to me, her husband? Eleanor looked like she was about to faint. A woman who had always prided herself on dignity now screamed at her daughter, "I sent you abroad to get an education, to come back and manage the company, not to learn all that depraved nonsense." "Mom, stop." I cut Eleanor off, feeling utterly exhausted. "Victoria, if you're not going to talk, then just sign the divorce papers. I'm begging you, let me go. This marriage, which was built on deceit from the very beginning, is something. I just want to escape." I thrust the divorce agreement into her hands, but she didn't even glance at it. Instead, she tore it to shreds and threw it into the trash. I picked up my phone and turned to leave, but Victoria clung to me, refusing to let go. She pleaded, "Sincere, I don't want a divorce. I never admitted Ethan was my boyfriend. It was all his one-sided fantasy." I couldn't take it anymore. I slapped her hard across the face. Victoria didn't dodge, didn't flinch, didn't resist. She just held on tighter, still refusing to let go. Slap, 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 slap. Only when my hand went numb did Victoria's grip slowly loosen. Her face was swollen, but she still whispered softly, "Sincere, I know you're angry right now. It's okay. I'll wait for you to calm down." But I felt very calm. Before I left, I saw Ethan still standing there, staring dazedly at Victoria. A nameless fire ignited in my heart, as if I were the villainous side character tearing the true couple apart. While waiting at a red light, I sent the support agreement to my lawyer. The next day, I sued Ethan. I demanded the return of every cent Victoria had spent on him during our marriage. Ethan called me a dozen times, but I didn't answer once. I took a rare, leisurely sip of tea, feeling some of the malice in my heart finally ease. Why should he get to recklessly destroy my life and hurt my children, yet lose nothing but love? In the end, Victoria was hateful, but Ethan wasn't going to walk away unscathed either. But Ethan somehow found out my new address. As I was pulling into the underground garage, he suddenly darted out from the side and stood in front of my car. I slammed on the brakes, breaking out in a cold sweat. He clung to my car window, refusing to move. Then he lifted his shirt, revealing a chest covered in scars of all shapes and sizes. "I didn't show up for 3 years because I was recovering from my injuries every day," he said. "The tenderness and care you enjoyed from Victoria were only possible because she vented all her stress on me." His back was a mass of scars, not a single patch of smooth skin, but what did that have to do with me? I rolled my eyes, my face cold and indifferent. What's the point of telling me all this? Do you want me to acknowledge your sacrifice? Or feel guilty? Sorry, I just think you brought it all on yourself. Ethan opened his mouth. I'm a victim, too. I cut him off in disgust. You were the one chasing her. What do you have to complain about? I don't care about your twisted love-hate drama with Victoria. I just want back the house she bought you and the monthly support payments of $1 million. If you don't have the money, find it. Don't delay my divorce settlement. I called security and had them drag him away. Ethan struggled, his furious shouts echoing in the empty garage. Sincere Clark, you're too harsh. You're driving me to my death. You went after a child. You're far harsher than I am. I lit a cigarette, staring off into the distance. Harsh? Maybe. I admitted it. I had a lot of misplaced anger toward Ethan. Not just a little, but a lot. If Ethan had just been a lover Victoria took on during the marriage, I would only hate Victoria for her weakness. But he had been entangled with her for more than 3 years. He knew exactly how rotten their relationship was. If Ethan loved her so much, why didn't he tell me everything when she first confessed to me? If he had just given me a hint, I would never have stepped into this disastrous marriage. Victoria still refused divorce. Just as I was planning to file for legal separation, she suddenly appeared at my doorstep, wanting to talk. Victoria had cut her hair short. She wore a simple white t-shirt and pants, holding a bouquet of lilies exactly like she had 3 years ago when she first confessed her love to me. But we both knew we could never go back. She offered me the flowers. I didn't take them. Her voice was hoarse, her forced smile trembling, her hand stubbornly outstretched. Sincere, don't be like this. If we have to part ways in the end, let this bouquet be my gift to you for your new life, okay? I didn't want to waste time. I took the flowers and stepped aside to let her in. You'd better be here to talk about the divorce. Victoria pulled a medical report out of her bag, her tone appeasing. Sincere, Ethan hurt our child. I took him to have a procedure. He can never have children now. Are you satisfied with this result? I stared at her coldly. So what if Ethan died? Would my child come back? Victoria's smile froze. Her hands dropped to her sides. Slowly, she sat down in the living room, nervous, and began to recount her experiences abroad. Finally, her eyes red, she concluded, I really don't love Ethan. The only one I've ever loved is you. I laughed bitterly. You say you love me, so why didn't you break it off with Ethan when you came back? Victoria's hands clenched the cup as she tried to defend herself. I was afraid I wouldn't be able to control myself and would hurt you. I didn't want you to get hurt. She bit her lip, but forced the words out. Ethan was just a tool for me to vent my frustrations. I shook my head. You're a truly rotten person. Victoria lowered her head, saying nothing. I gently lifted her chin, forcing her to meet my eyes. For a moment, hope flickered in Victoria's gaze, but then she heard the confusion in my voice. Since you already know you're a rotten person, why did you have to drag me into it? However much I once loved you, Victoria, that's exactly how much I hate you now. Her expression broke into sorrow, tears streaming down her face. Sincere love is something you can't control. I didn't want to get angry, but I couldn't stop myself. You're both selfish people. You are, and so is Ethan. The two of you should have just rotted and festered together. Why did you have to pull me down with you? Victoria grabbed my hand, pain overflowing from her eyes. Her voice trembled. Sincere, hit me. As long as it makes you feel better. She pressed my hand against her still swollen face. This time, I didn't resist. I closed my eyes tight. When I opened them again, I was calm. Victoria, you once led me to a new life. Let's not make this uglier than it already is. She knew me best. The calm in my eyes gave her a premonition. We were really over. She almost ran away. But before leaving, she suddenly turned, her tearful eyes searching mine. Can we really not be together anymore? I shook my head. Being married to you, I lost too much. My 5-month-old child, the only heirloom my grandfather left me, and Sincere Clark's love for Victoria Belmont. Which of these things can be brought back? Tears streaked down her face, leaving wet trails. She swallowed her sobs and asked again, if I had been honest from the beginning, would we have had a happy ending? I shook my head once more. If you had been honest from the beginning, we never would have been together. My love is selfish. I could never accept your years-long entanglement with Ethan, and I would never kneel before you, hurting myself just to please you. In the end, Victoria was forced by Arthur and Eleanor to sign the divorce papers. She didn't fight me for custody of our daughter. Yet as she signed, her hand lingered, hesitating. If you're about to say something that'll make me unhappy, then just shut your mouth, I warned, but Victoria set down the pen and spoke anyway. Sincere, the things I gave to Ethan. Please don't pursue it, I sneered. What? Do you feel sorry for him? She paused, then answered carefully. I don't feel sorry for him. He's pathetic too, and he can't come up with the money. This money is nothing to you. Can't you just let it go? That same familiar disgust washed over me again. And what if I insist? I asked stubbornly. Victoria stayed silent, but her pause told me enough. I pulled the blank check she'd once thrown at me out of my bag and placed it before her. Since you don't feel sorry for Ethan, then don't meddle. I won't take a penny more than what I'm owed. But if you insist on getting involved, then it depends on how much compensation you think Ethan deserves. She hesitated, then slowly picked up the check. I gave a bitter smile. Every second of her hesitation was proof of how absurd our marriage had been. She claimed she had no feelings for Ethan, but maybe she was the only one who believed that. Victoria finally pushed the check back toward me. Sincere, I'm sorry. This is extra compensation for you. I glanced at it. It was nearly all the liquid cash she still controlled. Arthur and Eleanor had watched silently the entire time, offering no opinion. Only when I left did Eleanor quietly tell me to bring my daughter back to visit them often. I found out much later that the very next day, Arthur and Eleanor rewrote their wills. They left their entire fortune to my daughter, Nana, without giving Victoria a single cent. I moved with my daughter to a new city, believing I'd never have anything to do with Victoria again. But I never expected Ethan would dare come find me. Other than the dark stubble on his face, he looked fine. Clearly, Victoria had been taking good care of him. He looked at me, eyes brimming with resentment. Our bodies are so compatible. So, why doesn't she love me? Even though you're divorced, she'll always keep a place for you in her heart. Hilarious. Was Victoria's heart some kind of prime real estate everyone wanted a piece of? I stirred my coffee, watching Ethan sink into his own thoughts with disgust. Love, 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 that was all he knew. Probably only he and Victoria believed there was no love between them. Where the money was, that's where the love was. Victoria had given him her all. I didn't believe for a second she didn't love him, but I would never say it aloud. It was best for those two scumbags to be locked together forever, so they couldn't go on hurting anyone else. Ethan had his luxurious lifestyle, but he would never have love. Maliciously, I thought it would soothe my wounded heart if Victoria and Ethan were trapped in their dramatic love-hate hell for the rest of their lives. With that thought, I drained my coffee and smiled. You still haven't been promoted? Of course not, you're just a bed warmer. How could that compare to true love? Seeing his face darken, I slapped my forehead in mock annoyance. Oh, sorry. I forgot you don't even have that function anymore.